Okay, now we're going to talk about the final principle of design, and these are unity and variety. These are, like, variety is the hardest one for people to get. Unity is a little easier. Okay, unity has to do with the appearance or condition of oneness. That means, like, you look at a picture and all the basic formal elements come together to create a coherent and harmonious whole. So, like, you feel like if you changed any one thing, it wouldn't feel quite right. It would affect the way the image looks. And there's certain things you can do to ensure that your image is unified. Okay, let's talk about these. Some design decisions that can lead to unity. So the first is a balanced composition. Now, if you're writing about this, I don't want you to say the composition is balanced. I want you to tell me what kind of balance. Is it symmetrical? Is it asymmetrical? Is it radial? And if it's symmetrical, is it absolute symmetry? Or is it bilateral symmetry? I think I break down, like I go, no, I don't. So I'm going to have to do this here. So when we look at this image, what kind of balance do you think it has? I'm going to say I think it has radial balance. So we can start right here as the central point, and all of these pictures and posters on the wall, see how they kind of radiate off of it? The chair, like we go from here, we get the chair. We go from here, we hit the flag. We go from here, we hit this guy in the head. Ouch. We go from here, and it looks like it's one of Trump's hats. I hope not. We get to that hat. So everything's like radiating off of the central point. So this is a radially balanced composition. And then you have to explain, like explain why you made that decision that it's radially balanced. You have to use details from the picture to describe this. So something else that can lead to a unified composition has to do with that repetition and rhythm that we talked about. So there's a repetition in this particular image, a square and rectangular shapes that creates a rhythm that leads our eye throughout the entire picture. So then you would proceed to tell me where you see all these square and rectangular shapes that are repeating throughout this image. So there's squares on the front of the desk as well as the top of the desk. There's rectangles on the side of the filing cabinet as well as the front of the cabinet. The seat of the chair is a square. The openings between the legs, those are square. The floor is a rectangular shape. The red baseboard is a rectangular shape. Each one of these calendars and posters and pictures on the wall, they're all rectangular shapes. We also have a repetition of overlapping. This is when I say overlapping shapes, you got to talk about the repetition of rhythm of those overlapping shapes. There can't just be two overlapping shapes. So like this desk overlaps the wall, the chair overlaps the wall, the desk overlaps the man, and the man overlaps the wall, and the man overlaps the filing cabinet, and each one of those pictures on the wall overlaps the wall. So another thing that can lead to unity is like a solid color or texture or pattern in the background. So that could be like, in another example, that could be the sky going all the way across the background. In this case, this blue wall goes all the way across the background. This red, we're going to assume this red baseboard goes all the way across, and the floor goes all the way across. It could also, there could be like a texture in the background, like a texture of leaves, that, or like the texture on the mountain or something that goes all the way across. There could be a pattern in the background that goes all the way across. While this image doesn't have a horizon line, if you're doing a landscape or a city scene or something, you'll see a horizon line in the background, and that can help unify it. If the artist is using 1 or 2 point linear perspective, like what is the artist using here? Let's figure it out. Like this line, if we follow the side of this cabinet, this desk, and we follow the side of this desk over here, eventually they're going to converge on the same vanishing point, which is about right here. Also, this chair is going to converge on it. So this is using 1 point linear perspective, and that's helping. And then things like the directional line formed by a row of objects. So we have like this directional line, like if we follow these rows of pictures, that's creating a directional line. I'm kind of like, we wouldn't talk about these rows on this chair because there's not enough of them. Okay, so we're gonna look at these pictures and we're gonna see which one seems more unified. Now, for unity, you need to have, for one thing, you need to have an even distribution of a basic formal elements. So in this image, there's a equal distribution of like a couple of things. This curve of this hand, this curve of this hand. So like we're following these curves around. There's also an equal distribution of the, like, since this is done in pencil, it's actually probably a print, but it looks like it's in pencil. There's equal amounts of dark and medium tones and light tones on these hands that are on opposite sides. So we're following them around. But we look at this one, this is not very well balanced. So it only has like these darks here, and then you get all these lights down here. So this one's kind of like heavy up here, which is going to pull the picture down to this side. And in this case, it's because of these repeating values of lights, darks, and grays repeat. We follow them around in a circle, and it makes it more well balanced. We already talked about that. So when we look at this image here, what kind of design decisions help to create unity in this image? Well, one thing you could talk about is that there's a lot of the suggestion of time and motion going on. The trees are blowing in the wind, the paper's blowing, the grass is blowing. The guys are like, they're trying to hold on to their stuff and their hats are blowing. So all that repetition of things that seem to be suggesting that they're moving, that helps create unity. But what else does? Well, let's look. There's the color that's in the background of the sky, like the red strip, and then this kind of more creamy color, and this blue, it goes all the way across the image, and that helps to unify the image. There's a lot of overlapping. There's a repetition of overlapping, which creates a rhythm throughout this image. Like the guys are overlapping the grass in the pathway, and the trees overlapping the grass and Mount Fuji and the sky. And like this guy and this guy, they're overlapping this grass and this pond area here. So there's like tons of overlapping in this. There's also like a consistent pattern of the grass that goes all the way across the picture. That helps. There's also, like, the image is unified because there's lots of blues, like light blues and dark blues and greens. So these are like analogous colors that are found throughout the image. Even the brown has got like blues in it. So that repetition of all of that helps to unify the image. But you know, like if things are too unified, then what happens? Like if everything's always the same, if you go to school every single day and you come home and then you go to school the next day and then you come home and you have to listen to me every single day, you're going to be bored. We're going to be bored during this coronavirus. I can tell you that. I'm sick of staying home. So if you're like, you don't want to get bored, you got to change things up some. You got to have something that's different in your images. This is known as variety. But we got to talk about variety in a different way than you're used to talking about it. So variety does not, when we're talking about basic principles of design, it does not mean a whole lot of different things. It means the one or two small areas of basic formal elements that are different than all the other basic formal elements in the picture. So we're going to talk about this picture, and first we're going to talk about it in terms of unity. So this image is unified through the use of one-point linear perspective. All these images are drawn in one-point linear perspective. This image is unified because the blue sky with the clouds goes all the way across the background. This image is unified because there's a repetition of directional lines. These are found in the side of the railing of the bridge. These directional lines are found in the shadows that run alongside the bridge. Their directional lines are found in the dividing line between the sidewalk and the street. Even the sides of this building that are drawn in perspective, these are directional lines because they lead straight to these people. And this building way in the background, the edge of it leads down to this man's hat. And these buildings back here start in one place and end up at the railing. So these are all like repetition of directional lines that leads our eye throughout the picture. There's also repetition of browns and earth colors, analogous earth colors. So there's all this browns, there's yellow greens, there's oranges, there's like more yellow green over here. There's like all of these browns and oranges, and the yellow greens, they all contain that primary color yellow. There's a green back there. So that those are all create unity. But what creates variety? So let's figure this out. So we're looking at this picture, and all these people are walking, and the river down below is moving. These people over here are walking. Even when you think about things receding into the distance, like, because this has been drawn in one-point linear perspective, it's moving. These direction lines are moving into the distance toward that vanishing point. But what is not moving? What's staying still? This guy right here. He's just standing there. He's standing still. So all the suggestion of time and motion is countered by the suggestion of stillness. So what else could create variety in this image? So there's lots and lots and lots of desaturated colors. There's the brown, there's the, like this, these are all kind of tones of yellow green because they're kind of grayed down. And this red, everything's grayed down. The man's jacket, the woman's dress is kind of like brownish gray. Even the blue is like not the blue that you're going to find on the color wheel, but you look around and there's one small area of a saturated green. And that little bit of green creates unity. Oh, not unity, I'm so sorry. That little bit of green creates variety. So we found two things that create variety. There are a lot of toned down brownish, grayish colors. There's there's only this one saturated green hue that would be found on the color wheel. There's lots and lots of movement, tons of movement going on. All these people are moving. The river's moving. These people are moving. the perspective lines are moving, receding into the distance, but there's this one little bit of variety. The sky's standing still. So please don't, like when I ask you about variety on the paper, don't go like there's people, there's a bridge, there's buildings, there's this, there's that. That's not variety. That's not the kind of variety we're talking about. We're talking about the one or two basic formal elements that are different than all the rest. So what creates variety in this image? Well, we noticed when we talked about unity, there's a whole lot of movement in this image. There's a whole lot of the suggestion of movement with all the wind blowing and the grass and the papers and the tree trying to stand up and the leaves blowing, but there's only Mount Fuji in the distance is remaining still. There are lots of blues and greens and the dark blues and light blues and lots of whites, and there's some, but there's not a lot of reds. There's this red shade up here, and there are these pink hats and this little pink, I don't know if this is a mailbox or what, but that little bit of that red and that pink, that creates variety. So when we look at this image right here, what creates unity? Well, one thing that does, I wish we were in class because you could tell me, but one thing that does is the sky goes all the way across the background. The radial balance creates unity. Like this woman is the central point, and then everything radiates against or from that woman. That creates unity. There's a lot of toned down colors. There's grays and grays and grays and brown. All these are like desaturated colors. There's a ton of desaturated colors in this image. But what creates variety? Oh, also, I forgot, there's all these, this is a directional line. So there's a circular movement, circular movement, circular movement here as well. And that helps to create unity. And there's lots of overlapping. The glove, the sign, the key, the bird, the leaves, the candle, they all overlap. What creates variety? So I see lots of curved shapes. The woman, the mirror, the key, the bird, the leaves, the candle holder, the gloves, the crinkled paper. So what can you compare that to that there's very little of? The straight line of the key, the straight edges of the candle. Again, there's lots of desaturated colors, the blue tint in the background, shades of greens and these toned down other colors, but there's that one yellow saturated candle flame that creates variety. Okay, let's see, what else is there? We're gonna look at this picture. We're going to talk about this picture in terms of everything we learned, because you're going to have to write about it in the paper. And again, I wish you were here so you could tell me so I don't have to tell you. But that's the way it goes during COV 19. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is what sort of balance does this image use? What do you think? Do you think it's symmetrical? I'm going to divide this down the middle. Let me see if I can draw in here. I'm going to draw this down the middle. Oh, that's a lousy line. Are the shapes on the right side placed similarly to the shapes on the right side? I'm gonna see how this fills up all this space, but see how there's all this open space. See how this goes all the way to the top, but this doesn't. See how there's a girl here, a shape, this shape here, but there's no shape here that's similar. So is this symmetrical? No, it's not symmetrical. So let's see, could this be asymmetrical? Now, one of the hallmarks of something being asymmetrical is you can line up objects. Oops, I meant to go down here, but like the top of the, like we start with the top of the dog's head to this guy's head to the horse's head to this, that lines up diagonally pretty much. Let's see if there's something over here. We go from this sombrero to this guy's elbow to this guy's hands. Oh, guess what? Guess what, everybody? It's asymmetrical. But could it also be, let me find the eraser. Where's the stinking eraser? Okay. Could it also, wait, erase. I'm trying to erase everything. Or, oh, I guess I have to like physically erase. Okay. Could it also be radial? Let's see how that works. Where can we, who would we start with? Would we start with M as the center? So that's coming off of there. And this is coming off of here. This is coming off of here. Oh wait, where's my line? Draw with this line. This is coming off of here. These guys, they don't quite, yeah, I guess they do. Look, they all come off of here. So if you told me that this was radial or asymmetrical, I would accept that, but you're gonna have to prove it to me by using either, like if it's radial, you can draw on the image to signify your point. If it's asymmetrical, you can figure out where the diagonal line is on the image. But if it's asymmetrical, you're also going to have to find repeating basic formal elements that lead your eye throughout the picture. For example, there's white, and then there's like different shades of white. So you could say the white guys cutting with the white guys, they're not white. The guys wearing white that are cutting with the machetes in the background leads our eyes to the white poles, leads our eyes to the light value. Well, why don't we just say light values of the gray guys, long underwear, to the light values, the cream colors of this guy's clothing, to the white clothes that the guys carrying the bamboo are wearing, to the white that the little girl, and I'm assuming this is her mother, that her mother are wearing. So you would have to describe a basic formal element that repeats throughout the whole picture in order for us to really truly verify that your image is asymmetrical. And you will also have to draw diagonal line where things line up. Okay, so then let's look at this picture and let's figure out, who do you think the focal point of this picture is? Now this is a hard one, like, because people have told me different things, but let's see who a lot of people are looking at. This boy's creating, I don't want the eraser. I don't even really want to draw. Oh, go away, eraser. Let's just use it for now. This boy is looking at this woman. This girl is looking at this woman. This guy that's sitting on the steps is looking in the direction of this woman. The lazy guy up here is looking in the direction of this woman. This directional line formed by this man, where does it go? Toward this woman. This is drawn in perspective, and if we just keep following this perspective line right here, where does it go to? It goes to this woman. So I'm going to say this woman is the focal point. This woman is the focal point because all these lines of sight, and then you're going to tell me who's looking at her, lead you straight to this woman. This woman is the focal point, even though she has her back turned to us, because the directional lines created by The horse's rump leads to this woman. The leaves behind her, the directional lines created by them, lead to this woman. The directional line formed by this row of men leads to this woman. Now, what else creates her as the focal point? Well, if we look at pretty much everything else is kind of in the sunshine. They're light to medium values, but we pull over to this woman, and this is the most shaded area of the image. And because she's surrounded by all these lighter values, our focus moves to her. So I say, this justifies why I say she is the focal point. Also, she is the only figure or object in the image, like helped by this tree behind her that goes from the top of the image all the way down to the bottom of the image. And so that pulls us toward her, like these directional lines here lead to the leaves, which leads to the girl that's looking at her, which leads to the woman. So I'm going to say that she is emphasized as a focal point for all those reasons I just named, even though she is in the most shadow in the picture. So now we're going to talk about scale and proportion in terms of proper proportion. If you look at everybody in this image, does everyone seem properly, like, let's pick one person. Let's pick this boy right here. We're going to look at this boy, and we're going to look at his individual body parts in relationship to one another. Do all the parts of his body seem proportionate? Or does it seem like some parts of his body maybe are too short? Well, you know, like, are your arms as long as your legs? I don't know, maybe you should measure them. But to me, it seems like, so like if his arm was hanging down, it would come to here. I don't know, it seems like his legs are a trifle on the short side. They're like disproportionately small, maybe. I could be wrong. But then when we look at everyone in relationship to each other, like some people are far away, some people are further away, some people are up close, and then some people are even closer. Like this girl and this woman, they're the closest. This boy is next. These people here carrying the sugar cane are next. They're kind of on this leg a little bit closer than this man on the horse, closer than this guy sitting on the stairs, closer than this guy on the lazy guy on the hammock, and even closer than these guys in the background. So really, more or less, to me, things seem proportionate. Now we're going to talk about comparative proportion. Let's talk about comparative proportion in terms of size, and we're going to find two similar basic formal elements. So I'm going to find two directional lines. I'm going to start with this directional line on the sugar cane that the guy's carrying. It starts at the boy, runs all the way down the sugar cane, and ends at this plant leaf. Then we're going to go to this directional line on the column. Starts at the top of the column and goes to this guy that's sitting on the steps. So the directional line formed on the edge of the sugar cane that the guy's carrying is comparatively much longer than this directional line that leads on the side of the column that leads to this man. Then we're going to talk about the use of overlapping versus the use of one-point perspective. So overlapping and one-point perspective are not exactly the same, but they're ways of depicting space. So now we're going to talk about quantity. There are a whole lot of different things that are overlapping, and then you would name some of them as compared to there's only one real example maybe two, that we can see where this image uses 1-point linear perspective. Like if you follow this line, it's going to go to a vanishing point. And then if you follow those guys, that row of guys right there, they're going to lead to the same vanishing point. Now we can talk about, we can compare saturated versus desaturated. I see a ton of desaturated colors in this image. I see the browns, the dark greens, the dark reds, these dark browns, these tints of green, these light greens, these yellows, these all these colors. But do you see anything that's saturated? So to me, there's very little saturated colors, and it would be some of these blues are saturated blues, whereas everything else is desaturated. Then you could go on to talk about pattern, compare patterns to things that are non-pattern, or smooth textures to textures. You can talk about like suggestion of time and motion. There are lots and lots and lots of people moving. There are only very few people that are standing stock still. This guy on the hammock, this guy on the stairs, this girl while she's waiting for her to cut those papayas. Okay, so that's, we talked about some of the aspects of comparative proportion. Now we're going to talk about rhythm and repetition. There is a repetition of analogous colors that create a rhythm that our eyes follow throughout the picture. This repetition can be found in the green papayas that the boy's carrying, the dark green leaves that are in front of him and behind the girl and the woman, in the papayas that the woman's cutting, in the sugar cane in the background, and the sugar cane in the foreground. Those are light greens. The men are wearing yellow hats, or yellowish hats. All the men are wearing yellowish hats. The ground is like greenish colors, yellow greens, blue greens. So all that green is everywhere in the picture, and it repeats and it creates a rhythm that our eyes follow. Now we're going to talk about unity. What unifies this picture? One thing that unifies this picture is the use of analogous colors throughout, and then you will tell me what those analogous colors are. One thing that unifies this picture is the use of 1-point linear perspective. Another thing that unifies the picture is there are a lot of browns. Here's brown on the woman's arms, on the people's skin, on the man's horse, on the guards' uniforms, on the color of the dog in the background and the front of the porch and the rock. Like all of that brown unifies the image. All the overlapping of everyone unifies the image. But what creates variety in the image? So, so that blue, that saturated blue creates variety. The use of red on the porch creates variety because there's very, very little red elsewhere. The people that are sitting still, they create variety to counter that, all that suggestion of movement all throughout the image. So there's like lots of things that unify the picture, and there's a few things that create variety in the picture. So that is it, and that is the end of this long lecture. I'm sure you're just wish you could just keep hearing my voice.